All right, we're going to be discussing the mechanics from a front view, and we're just going to concern ourselves with our path or the flow down the mound. So we already got these videos to the top of these guys' leg lifts. Obviously, every pitcher comes down the mound at different rates, different speeds. However, to make these guys flow together, I have changed up their speeds to fit. So what we're going to see is that we got Jerry Jones over here getting that front leg fully extended and really sitting into his delivery. We got Greinke, who's got his knee, which is going to be further back towards second base than his foot is. He's really taking this front knee and kind of curling it back so that his front hip stays closed. And Kirby is going like Jones here with his front leg, but he's keeping it in a more bent position rather than kicking it straight out like Jones. But what we do notice is no matter how these guys load into their back hips, getting down into their legs, engaging their lower halves, what do we notice? We notice where the glove is going. And that's to help them be able to see over their front shoulder. They want to be looking down the barrel of their shoulder, because the longer we can be looking here over this shoulder as we proceed down the mound. Obviously, we've gotten back to center, but look, we're still looking right over that shoulder. Still looking right over that shoulder. Still looking right over that front shoulder. The longer we can do that into our moment of foot strike, bam, bam, we can see front shoulder, and our head is still trying to fight to keep that front, or rather our front shoulder is still fighting to stay above our chin. The front shoulder is still fighting to stay in above the chin. The front shoulder is still fighting to stay in above the chin. And when we do that, we can see that the back hip now has been able to come through, exposing the belt buckle to the batter, to our catcher, but preventing, because that front shoulder's fought to stay in so that we continue to look over it. Look what that's done with our chest. It's kept it squared up, squared up, squared up, as that lower half has been able to fire, and there lies our upper lower half separation that we're trying to achieve. And now here comes the most important part. Getting into this position is key for both our power production, our ability to throw the baseball with our body, thus reducing the amount of stress that's going on through our arm during that delivery, and helping ensure, this wasn't the straightest line here, helping ensure our energy continues to flow to the catcher. All right, we can see that head staying there, that head staying there. Kirby's fighting to keep it in there. And you can see he's fighting to keep it in there because it did not go more out there. So we're rotating that back shoulder. We're rotating that back shoulder forward. forward, forward, forward. So that way all of our power can be flung through those fingers, out through that ball, forward. If we watch that again without any interruption, into foot strike, out of foot strike. Everything staying in line with our target. And then noticing as they're getting into release, where are those chin and chests going? To the target. To the target. The angle of our trunk, this mass from our shoulders through our waist, our trunk right now is upright. It's above our hips. In relation to the ground, it's in a 90-degree angle. As we get into release, those trunks in relation to the ground are no longer up here trying to throw the baseball. Instead, in relation to the ground, these trunks of these elite throwers of the baseball, both in terms of command, the best to ever do it, in terms of longevity and success, one of the best to do it, and an upcomer with elite velocity and potential to be an all-star. Every one of their trunks at release went from being up here at foot strike to out here at release, bringing that energy down the mound, but most importantly, towards our target. And that's something that we're able to see even easier and more clearly in the side view videos. All right, so if we kind of take this back once more and we see these arm slots, we'd say, boom. Oops, let me draw a better line than that. Right, we're at a high three-quarter, three-quarter. We are in a same thing, three-quarter, high three-quarter. Same thing here, right? So these are some of your most common arm slots are the three-quarter to high three-quarter arm slot. And then what we'll look at next here are some guys that are in that lower three-quarter tier. So we'll let, we got Luis Hill, Kyle Harrison, and Carl Crawford. All right, so the same thing, moment of that foot strike, we can see that they're still fighting to keep that front shoulder in, keep that front shoulder in, fighting to keep that front shoulder in, and then coming to release and through, we can see how those heads are fighting to stay in. Luis Hill a little bit outside, but we can see through release, bam, it's there, it's there, it's there, it's there. Now it's out, which is no big deal. It's already stable for long enough post-release, bam, that he could do a cartwheel over here if he wanted to after. So fighting to keep that front shoulder in, And by doing that, the shoulders have stayed squared up, and with a good lower half timing and pattern sequencing, we got the back hip to have come forward, exposing that belt buckle to the batter, creating that upper and lower half separation that we're trying to seek in order to achieve higher velocities and minimize the stress that's put on our arm during these high intense and continuous throws. If we then take these guys into their moment of release, we got that same concept that we did earlier, and we can see here's our low 3/4, even getting closer, some would say, to even true sidearm. We have that low 3/4, and we got that 3/4 to low 3/4. But what we can notice is all the same with those different arm slots, but the most common arm slots in our game. All these guys are fitting the same bill in their own unique ways, but these important key points are all very much getting checked off by each, no matter what. All right, so what we're going to be discussing here is the body's position that we get to the moment our front foot gets into the ground for the very first time. And this moment in time is called our foot strike. So we are going to be talking about the moment when, boom, those feet get into the ground for the very first time. And again, that's called our foot strike position. At foot strike, we want to be looking at our body in two halves. Our upper half and our lower half. At foot strike, we want our lower half to have rotated forward towards our target. And a useful thing to look at to know if we've been able to do that is the belt buckle. And is that belt buckle facing the target? If the belt buckle is facing the target, it's a pretty good chance that we have successfully rotated both the back foot, the back knee, and the back hip. When we're able to rotate the back foot, the back knee, and the back hip, as our front foot is getting into that foot strike position, we will successfully be able to get our belt buckle driving towards the target. If we specifically take a look at just the back foot of these four guys, let's watch as they are rotating that back leg, how that back foot is rotating. At this point in time, all four guys still have their entire foot flat onto the ground, and then they begin to rotate through or over top of their big toe. Their foot kind of rolls, folds over, or drives forward. And as the foot does that motion, we now shift our view to the back knee and know as the foot is rolling over the big toe, that the back knee is also rotating forward. And how those two things, the back foot and the back knee, are working together. We can also see that as we go to drive and rotate that back foot and back knee, how they do that while they gain ground down the mound and towards their catcher. So this is the difference between rotating our bodies forward, or a word for that is driving ourselves forward, versus just rotating in place. If we were just rotating in place, our bodies would not be able to gain this ground down the mound. Our bodies wouldn't be able to accelerate our power and energy down the mound. And we can then look and see that the foot has the toe, and then the heel is in front of the toe, meaning we have rotated forward. We then go to the upper body, the upper halves, from the waist up, and we want to separate that upper body from the lower body. We want the direction that our hips are facing, which is to the target, to be separate from the direction our shoulders are facing. So we notice we can see the Giants, the Pirates, and his number. We can see the Phillies, and we can see the Brewers or Milwaukee. I'm not sure what they have displayed on their jerseys there. So the direction of their lower bodies is to the target, and the direction of their shoulders is still facing, for these right-handers, towards third base, or the direction they have been the entire time. So we rotate the lower body first, then we get into foot strike, then we rotate our upper body second. And the more that we can get those lower bodies to fully rotate to the target by the time that front foot hits the ground, and we've also been able to keep that upper body from rotating and staying back, we will have created as much upper lower half separation or hip shoulder separation as possible. And the more hip shoulder separation or upper lower half separation we can create, the more power we're going to be able to produce, and the amount of stress that's put on our arm is going to be reduced. What we're also going to notice is that almost regardless of your arm slot, if we have a true 3/4, low 3/4, high 3/4, an over-the-top arm slot, or anything in between those, we're always going to find ourselves in a relatively 90 degree angle, meaning from our elbow across to our other shoulder, we want to think is nice and even. 90 degrees in that armpit. We also want to think 90 degrees in that elbow. We want this type of arm position, that 90-90, we'll call it, at the moment of foot strike. When our arm has loaded up to this position here, at the moment of foot strike, and the upper body has not rotated yet, our body's rotation will accelerate the throw forward. If the arm is not in this 90-90 position, the body's rotation forward is going to be less than ideal and in sync with how the arm will flow after the body goes. So we're looking for this 90-90-ish position in that throwing arm at foot strike. What we can also notice at foot strike is, where is this glove at? It's in front of the body by the rib cage. We're not letting it If we're thinking, here's some water, don't drown the glove. Don't let your glove get wet. Don't drown that glove. This one right here is a little too high. Should be more towards the belt. Okay. When the glove gets finished into the body like this, it's able to help keep this front shoulder in line, meaning it's not going to open up early. Because if that front shoulder starts to open up early, that's going to start to pull the back shoulder forward early. And now we would not have separated our upper and lower halves as much because the angle of the shoulders would begin to rotate forward, which would be more matching the angle of the hips. The final thing we're going to look at is this front leg. We see all these guys have different degrees of bend in their front legs. But what we're going to notice is that as the upper body now rotates to throw, we need to make our front leg become a firm fixture of which we can rotate around. So thinking about this front leg here turning into a flagpole. My flagpole is always going to be strongest if it's straight. Or at least I can't have my flagpole move forward while my body is trying to rotate forward. So we'll redraw these little outlines here. And we will have these guys, oh man, that's all right, it's going to get back to it anyway. Boom. And now we'll watch as they go to throw. How that leg is locking out, stiffening up, straightening out. So that now that leg is here, now that leg is here, now that leg is here and here. From the bend, straightening it out. And what we can notice is as that leg locks out, stiffens up, straightens out, becomes that firm flagpole, notice how that upper body is able to catapult itself out in front and down more. Able to get out in front more. Out in front more. So that way, if we look, we can't get everyone exactly at release, but ball just out, ball just out, ball is coming out, ball is slightly a little bit more out than the bottom too. But we're able to look at this angle of the chin to the waist. Back out to the front foot. Boom, boom, boom. Just how out in front of themselves they're getting. And that's because of that front leg's ability to lock out. So we can see that they're starting, boom, boom, there, and there. So now it's not just the arm throwing the ball down. It's the body throwing the ball down. It's the body going down with the throw. Body accelerating down. And as the body's accelerating down, the lower half is firming up. So that way, as I need to finish all this violent rotation, I have the ability to do that around that firm front leg. I have that ability to rotate around. I can finish all that violent rotation from my back leg around. I can finish all that violent rotation from my hips around. I can finish all that violent rotation out of my back shoulder around, giving my arm plenty of time to slow down and giving the back muscles, my scapular muscles, all the time they need to activate and slow down that rapidly accelerating arm. All right, bud, now that you've had the opportunity to learn from those big league examples from the side view and the front view, we have both of those views of yours synced up here. We will play them 2 times. The first time right here will be all one motion. And the second time, we will pause you at that moment of foot strike. So that way we can compare and contrast your body's positionings to the big leaguer's positioning. All right, so I'm going to start from the ground and work up. Like we talked about in the big league videos, we want to be cutting our bodies in half through the waist, creating our upper half and our lower half. And we're trying to separate those from one another, meaning the lower half rotates to the target while the upper half stays back, creating that separation via the belt buckle going towards the target while the center of the chest staying in line with where it has been. So if we go back in time and we look, our lower body's positioning is in one that has the ability to be very strong and aggressive out of, as long as we are on time and aggressive with it. And what we're going to notice is that as that knee begins its rotation, towards this later part is when the back foot starts to do its thing. But what we can see is that that front foot is already toes in the ground when that back foot really starts to try to turn itself over. And that's what ultimately leads us to not being able to get this back hip as much forward as your body potentially could. Because your back knee, like I said, is starting from a strength position to be aggressive with its rotation. And the real aggressive part of the knee begins like around here and goes the rest of the way. And that's because the foot kicks in. And your foot, when it really starts to kick in, this front foot starting to hit the ground already. So we need to do one of two things. We need to either get everything back here going just a little bit sooner in time, so that way it can finish its movement more completely before this front foot hits the ground. Or we need to keep this front foot from hitting the ground for just a split second longer than it is currently. Can we keep this foot floating above the ground as this backside continues to rotate us just a little bit further? That is probably going to be the easier of the two to do. Because what we're going to notice is as this leg gets down into its descent, how quickly it reaches full extension. And as it's reaching full extension, it's already reached out in front of us a significant amount. So not only is the knee no longer in any bend, it's already lengthened itself all the way out. But when it does that as well, it's about as far away from the body as it can get without the body starting to come along with it. So if we can think about as the body goes down the mound, the leg does not go down immediately. We kind of hesitate it up there at the top, get the leg to come all the way up, keep it up for a moment as the body goes down. One of the things that's going to help you be able to keep this leg up higher for a little bit longer is if as this leg is coming up, what we're going to notice, we kind of draw a line here, leg comes up, leg goes down, and your head's distance from this line really has not changed. From the very start distance to all the way down here, right? Our body has not gained any momentum down this mound. So now you're relying solely on this back leg's ability to rotate and drive you down this mound to create momentum. And when the back leg's got to do it all on its own, it's going to take a little bit longer for it to do it because it's a little bit tougher for it to do it, which then could explain why your backside foot is just a little late to the party of doing what it already knows it should do. So if we can think about as your leg is coming up, our body is starting to gain ground, we're going to be already gaining that momentum sooner, making it easier for that knee to be up a little bit higher for a little bit longer. What we're going to notice is that your body's posture as this leg comes up and then you start to go down, how your body kind of gets a little hunched and then it gets tall again. Gets a little hunched and then it gets tall again. We need to be between it getting a little bit hunched and getting tall again. Instead of doing two different movements, we need it to just be starting to come towards the target. And if we just get a quick example of that for you to better visually see that, we can get a guy that you probably hopefully know the name of, Ben Joyce, Angels closer from Tennessee, throws 103. What we'll notice in this slow-mo, we'll do that same thing. We'll draw that line. And as he's lifting his leg up, what we're going to notice is he's been getting closer to that line. As that leg comes up, his body is able to go forward. So then now, as this knee's up, now it starts to come down, but his body is already going forward when that leg's coming down. So now, when it reaches its full extension, his body is already going forward. Your leg comes all the way up. Leg goes all the way down. Leg goes all the way into extension. And now your body starts to come forward. Now you start to gain ground. So if we just tracked your head, that's too big. Let's do it by the eye. Start. Boom. So by the time you finally get to go forward, your leg is already fully been out, away from your body in this full reach. Do those same things. Eyeball. 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 Leg fully extended. Eyeball. So we can just see how much ground he's able to go towards the target versus your amount by the time your leg's fully extended. So we just got to get that body going down the mound. We're doing a lot of this leaning back, trying to keep the weight back, which is all good if we can get it out in front on time. And right now, we're just a little late with the back leg. So that then takes us to this. This is probably the most detrimental thing. We learned in the big league video that we want that chin looking over that shoulder with that glove up underneath it, which we can see we're doing on the front side here. And then what we learned from the side video is that we want this 90-90 with the baseball up here. So we got that 90 degrees in the armpit, 90 degrees in that elbow. And we got this very big angle here in your elbow, which is now going to lead to this thing dragging through. And that is just a high stressor for the elbow. Because now the arm is dragging. It never really gets to lay back. The arm never gets to, we'll pull Joyce back up here. Your arm never gets to lay back. And by lay back, I mean, watch how because he's in his 90-90, as his shoulders rotate forward, watch how his arm lays back. See that? Your arm doesn't get to do any of this lay back because of the fact that you're not in that 90-90. So now as you go forward, That's what your arms is, never laying back. It's just always back. And it's just always back. Instead of seeing it rotate back to fling forward. So because of that, there's a lot of stress in your elbow being dispersed throughout your elbow, trying to get this throw to get released out in front of you. And we can see when that ball is out of your fingers here, boom, it's out of your fingers. Here's your chin, and here's that ball. We're trying to release that ball out in front of us. So if we get to Joyce here, and we back it up a bit, so we see that zoom of that baseball. There's that baseball coming into frame. So somewhere between this frame and that frame, that ball's coming out of his hand, it looks like right there. And we can just see, if we just continue that down, how that's out in front of his body, not in line with his chin. And the reason because of that is because as you're rotating from this position here. You're more in line right now for a javelin throw. I don't know if you know what a javelin is, but if you just Google or YouTube a javelin thrower, this right here is almost the exact position that they're launching their throw from. And their throws go up that way. Because they're trying to throw it for as far as they can. We're trying to throw ours that way. So you can see as you're throwing, you're trying to keep that ball in your hand long enough, but almost all of that energy of that throw is going up, 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 and very little bit of your connection on that ball is still in your fingertips at the end to try to get this ball to now go this way rather than this way. So I would say we're going to want to really just focus on this arm first, because that's the thing that's going to keep us the most healthy. And then we can start attacking this lower body to try to start helping you throw harder. Because the last thing we want to do is start to create the power that these changes would make, but making it from this very risky arm path. So we're going to do arm path drills first for you, and then once we get that starting to develop, then we can revisit the lower body.